Greetings to everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar. I'm your host, Avis Raza, and uh, this webinar is arranged by Linguistics and Pedagogy Webinars, an organization based in Pakistan. We arrange international webinars for all of you, and we also give out the certificates after the completion of the webinar. We hope you all will participate and be active during the session. So, without further ado, I'll be explaining the way in which the webinar will be conducted for those who are new to this, and then we will be starting the session with the presentation by Dr. Farzana. So, this webinar will be divided into three parts. In the first part, we will be having the presentation by Dr. Farzana, and then it will be followed by Q&A session. Q&A session is further divided into two parts. In the first part, we will be taking some questions from the registration forms, and then we will have the live Q&A session, and you will have to comment your questions in live chat, and then ma'am will be answering those. So after that finishes, I will be explaining how you will receive your certificate. So make sure you watch till the end and understand properly how to fill the form for the certificate, and then you will receive your certificates through email. So now let's welcome Dr. Farzana and start the session. Hello, ma'am. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Good evening from Australia, and good afternoon, most probably from Bangladesh, and good day from wherever you are. Okay, welcome to our presentation. Before starting our presentation, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Farzana Chowdhury. I'm currently working as an associate professor at the Institute of Modern Languages at the University of Chittagong. My field of interest is applied linguistics, sociolinguistics, and English language education. I'm also currently working as a university fellow at Charles Darwin University, Australia. And before doing this job, I completed my PhD from the Sociolinguistics, Intercultural and Multicultural Studies from the University of Queensland, Australia. And before that, I also completed my Masters of Applied Linguistics in TESOL Studies from the University of Queensland. And initially, I completed my bachelor's and master's from the Department of English, University of Chittagong. That's up to me here, and other things you might have seen in my bio. So let's start our presentation. Yes. So you might have seen that using narrative is the, how can I do this? Let's have a think. Okay. Our topic is using narrative inquiry in linguistics research, particularly in applied linguistics research. And overview, I'll talk about what is narrative inquiry, what is inside here, the theoretical discussion, and I'll show you one of my study. Background. So Jerome Brunner, who is one of the founding fathers of narrative inquiry, writers, Brunner writes of basic modes of thought, each providing a distinctive way of ordering experiences. That means Jerome combined the story with the argument. So argument has one characteristics that gives the truth, and we know that the story is very nice, but sometimes it's imaginary. But when it is added with the argument, it will be an academic story. So a story and well-formed argument are different natural kinds, and both can be convincing in their own ways. Argument convince of their truth, appealing to procedure for establishing formal and empirical proof. Stories convince of their life likeliness, appealing more to criteria of verisimilitude. So from where the narrative inquiry comes from the storytelling. Is a concept that is used to describe how narrators attempt to make sense of experiences through stories. So what type of stories is this? This story is for not a simple story, it's the academic story, because here the narrator is not involved alone. Here the academic person, the researcher is involved in constructing the stories. Since the developments of sociolinguistics or can't do this. Since the development of sociolinguistics or sociocultural literary theory or cognitive theory, there has been a great deal of the use of the concept of narrative and its application. So we can see there is a narrative turn in social science. So that is the until I have to move on thing. Narrative. There is a narrative turn in social science research. How it happens? Because when the narrative is introduced, narrative inquiry has an intuitive appeal to researchers who have become wary of the variables and the quantification of the positivistic approach. People are fed up with using the quantitative research method again and again. So it gives a different appeal. And the interest in narratives reflects postmodern concerns with the self, identity, and individuality. From this perspective, we can say that self narratives or the stories people tell about themselves help us to understand the ways in which individuals situate themselves and their activities in the world. So, through telling the stories, we can position ourselves. We can situate ourselves. We can show our identity. Next one, interest in narrative has been linked to a turn towards the idea that research should both involve and empower the groups and individuals whose behaviors are the subject of research. Previously, the research participants are not given value. Narrative inquiry has given the power to the individuals to talk, to raise their voice. So, narrative inquiry expands the range of voices that are heard in research reports that was not heard in previously. It often highlights the experiences of marginalized groups outside the academy, although we should always bear in mind the ways in which these voices are mediated through those of the researcher in published work. So, through the narrative inquiry research, we might see that the voices of the marginalized, whose people are also can also be heard through the this research. We may interested in narrative inquiry. Human carry that is, we can go out from our laboratory, we can go out our office, and we can go to the people. The actual realities of the people we can promote through the narrative inquiry. Narrative inquiry in linguistic research. To promote meaning making of lived experience, uh, a narrative inquiry is developing as a credible approach in the study of linguistics and language education to investigate motivation, identity, multilingualism, learning loss, learner autonomy, and a variety of other topics. So, language is best understood as a psychological, social, and educational phenomena. It helps us to understand the inner mental worlds of language users, what type of language people are using, and the language learners and the language teachers, and the nature of language use, language teaching and learning as a social and educational activity. So we can see here that we can focus on that how the language is used in the migrational context. So here we can focus on the language use in various domains. So what type of language they are using at their family, what type of language they are using at a social domain with their friends. Okay, what is the significance, why they are using this language? So we have to ask their, explore their experiences through their stories. And if anyone is going to learn language, second language, or their heritage language, we can also explore their story, what type of difficulties they are facing, what type of challenges they are facing, and how they are successful in using their language. And in all of these cases, we can see the language as a social and sometimes it might be educational activity. So Barkhuizen used the term narrative knowledging. It's this. Why? We have to make experience. What type of experience we can use? I am seeing here one thing, a bar. I can't move these things. This is the technical problem most probably. And this is, okay. So Barkhuizen uses the term narrative knowledging. According to Barkhuizen, who I am influenced by his writing at first to do the narrative inquiry. So today I will also talk about him, his research again and again. I am grateful to him for his research on the narrative inquiry. So use the term narrative knowledging that makes sense through narrative. So according to Barkhuizen, the researcher will ask the participants to talk about their experiences. So researcher will listen and researcher will draft it, what the participant has said, and the researcher come back to the participants in the second round of interviews that you said these things. So the cross checking, then if the participant says that no, I didn't mean these things, I actually mean these things by this when I was telling this one. So when the researchers develop the story based on the interviews of the participants, then a researcher will again come to the participants to cross check whether the perception of the researcher is okay or not. Then the research, if the participant give the feedback, researcher might revise the story and develop another story. So in such a way, the story will be developed in a co-constructed way. That means where the participants and researchers are heavily involved. So that is called Barkhuizen, that it is the narrative knowledging. It can be used in the linguistic research. Narrative inquiry involves eliciting and documenting stories of an individual's life experiences. Clandine and Cornelia, I love them in their work in the narrative inquiry. Also comment that when lived experiences are revealed to the self or others, experiences are turned into a story. Suppose if I share my experience with you, it will be a story to you. In this respect, the study of stories or narratives is a focal point that narrative researchers hold in common in spite of its different methodological strategies. So, a story is, when the story is said, then it will be interpreted in terms of the literature of a field of process that is implication for the theory building. So when the a story a story researcher will get the story from the participants, then the researcher interpret the story from the theoretical understanding. Suppose if we look at the story of school going boys in an Western society, that if a boy comes from a refugee community, suppose a refugee Sudanese school boy is going to attend at the Australian primary schools. So if I want to know his story, so I'll take his stories from his experiences, and I can as a researcher I'll interpret it from the theoretical study of the identity. So in brief, we can see that the main strength of the study, how people use stories to make sense of their experiences, where it is important to understand phenomena from the perspective of those who experience them. So, narrative research has recently been classified into two main areas. One is the narrative inquiry, focuses on the socially content of narratives, narratives as used as method. Narrative is the content of the narratives. So we can see you can see sometimes you can be confused why it is written narrative inquiry and why it is written narrative study. So if it is narrative inquiry, it focuses on the content of the narratives. It is used as a method. The content of the narratives is very important because what the narratives are about, and it uses stories and storytelling as a methodological tool to investigate individual and group experiences and identities. And on the other hand, if you see that narrative study, it is focuses on the form and construction of the narratives, not the content. And the linguistic and organizational structure of narrative, that means it focuses on the structure. Here, the narratives as texts are the object of study, and texts are of a literary nature. So, narrative inquiry is a practical way of asking stories, and the narrative study is the it might be any text, and they focus on the form and the construction of the narratives. However, both seems to be different, but they are not distinct. They are both are essential for the narrative research. Now, what is a story? Stories assist. It's very important things because a story assists humans to make life experiences meaningful. We know that we have lots of experiences. It is not meaningful until I share speaks it to anyone. So when the experiences are shared, then it will be meaningful. Because when I tell my experiences on language learning, suppose language learning, to anyone, at the time I will revise, I will edit, okay, and I'll try to be meaningful to the audience. So stories assist humans to make life experiences meaningful. Stories preserve our memories, prompt our reflections, because when I tell stories, then I'll reflect on what actually happened in my experience, and it connect us with our past. Then I go back in past, and I'll tell about my present condition, and it will assist me to envision our future. So there's a connection, past, present, and future. It's a very interesting thing for the narrative inquiry. The narrative gives us the story. So from where we'll get the story? Because it is from someone. So who is the someone? Who has got the experiences. So the person who shares his or her experience to the researchers, that will be the story. When he or she is describing the story, so he goes back to his or her memories, and there will must have a reflections. So there's a connection, temporal connection, past, present, and future. Research. So, what is the role? So, researcher can collect the stories. The stories can be in the data, or researchers configure stories from the data, which may or may not have stories. So, sometimes it might happen that researcher can take the interviews, or sometimes researcher can take. Can take any text, or can take any memoir, or can any photo. So from the data, researcher can develop a story, or the researcher can develop the stories talking with the participant in a co-construction way. So from a story has different meaning. From today, you'll also think that, oh, my story is very different when I will tell it to my friends or family members. A story means different things to different people. Suppose in terms of cultures, in Bangladeshi cultures, if I tell any stories, it will be interpreted in one way that might be different when I tell it to any of my friends in Australia. So the meaning of the story is diverse in terms of the cultures, in terms of the socioeconomic groups. So socioeconomic groups, we can say that poor in our Asian culture, we can see the cultural people, the lower class, the middle class, and the higher class. So we know that the story, when I talk to the people with the lower socioeconomic background, that has one meaning. But if I talk to the any person with the elite class, then it will be interpreted in different way. So a story is diverse in terms of the socioeconomic groups, and it also diverse in different times. Suppose if I say any story 4 years ago or 10 years ago, that might be different if I say it again in at this stage. So it will be diverse in terms of meaning, in terms of the times and different ages. So when I was younger, the story was the same. The story has one meaning. The same story has different meaning when I am at the middle ages. Okay, so stories are also in difference in terms of gender and in terms of individual people. So from the here we can see that Konini and Klandinin says that narrative researchers to explore context and content in a narrative of three dimensions. Three dimensions. So narrative should be done in analyzed in terms of three dimension. One is the place, temporality, and sociality. So when we talk about the story, what we look at, first of all, we'll see the context, where the story is, the experience was, where was this experience. Understanding the context is also thought to be an essential part to make sense of any narrative, since each individual is always influenced by different contextual meaning settings. Suppose I have told you, so the story, if it happens in nowadays Ukraine, the story, if it is thought in Australia, it might have different meanings. So the context is very important, where the story is told, where the experience is happening, and the content second. So when we read a story, we'll think of the context. Next, we'll think of the content. What it is also important because it focuses on the meaning and what they are about. It is also important how the stories are told. So the not only the content, and also think how the stories were told. So, with emotions, with frustrations, or with happiness. So, as researchers, if we collect the data through the interviews, if I come back home, we'll see that we'll listen to the transcription, listen to the audio again and again, and we can think that, oh, the participant might have missed this one. Why he didn't mention it? Why did he hide it? Okay. So it is also important for us as a researcher. We have to dig out. So what is the main content, and how the story is told, and what is inside of the story, what is left out, and what can be told but he or she didn't tell it, what can't be told but why he mentioned it. So, as a researcher, we have to analyze these things, very important things. So, I am again telling that in the narrative inquiry, story is not a simply fairy tales. It is academic. So, we have to, as a researcher, we have to be very critical when we analyze the stories. Then, by the focusing on the features, some other researchers said that we have to focus on the features of the narrative. Some researchers think employment as an important element in a story. By the plots, narrative researchers identified that the order. So, employment means a story. A story might have some plots. So, narrative researcher says that when we develop the story from the experiences shared by our participants, we have to develop the story according to the plot. So, there must have introduction, there must have a middle, and there must have an end. So, there must have an organization. Like the stories, but sometimes a coherent as well as lucid narrative might be composed from the several parts spread during the course of the interview. Sometimes you can, when you will go to collect the data, you can see that stories are automatically generated from the data. Sometimes you can see that no, there is no coherence. The participant is telling one thing in the first part, and he or she might tell many other things, and again, he or she can tell the things again. So there might be very scattered way. So, as a researcher, we have to develop the stories following a structure of the story. There must have a plot according to the structure organization. Choice of the semiotic resources is very important. When the story is told, we have to think of what type of resources are used. Semiotic resource is a term you might know that is used in social semiotics and other disciplines to refer to means for meaning making. Semiotic resources are the actions, materials, and artifacts we use for communicative purposes, whether produced physiologically, suppose using the vocal apparatus, the muscle we use to make facial expression or gestures, or we can do it technologically, such as using the pen or ink or computer hardware or software, together with the key ways in which these resources can be organized. So semiotic resources have a meaning potential based on their past uses and a set of affordances based on their possible uses. And these will be actualized in concrete social contexts where their use is subject to semiotic regime. So there must have meaningful, and the story is also different in terms of the resources used by the participants. And stories is also different in terms of the temporality, during which, what does it mean, during which the story takes place, including its connection to past and future. They narrate experiences, the participants can narrate experiences from the past or the imagined future. Why it is imagined future? They tell about something that happened and or will happen in the life of the person telling this story. So I am just sharing the imagined future. What is the imagined future? Future is always the imagined, not because we can't see the future. So imagined future is situated where? Based on our past experiences, based on our present experiences. So based on our past experiences and based on our present experiences, we develop our imagined future. So there is a temporality. So it is also important to look at the temporality when we analyze stories told by our participants. When they are telling their stories, I have always stressed that they include reflection and the evaluation on those experiences, comments which portray emotions and beliefs associated with the experiences. We went through one thing. When we describe, sometimes we can be very excited. Oh my God, I own these prizes. Or sometimes we can say that, oh, I was so frustrated because I couldn't get it. So through the reflection, through the evaluation, we can get to know that we can portray the emotions and beliefs associated with the experiences. Another thing, the stories typically have a temporal dimension. In other words, we can see that something happens over a period of time again and again. So there is going on. Another thing, the stories embody action. Sometimes the story gives us the action. Sometimes happens in the story in some spatial or temporal context. The context is different way in different times. So stories always makes reference implicitly or explicitly who was involved in this story. So I don't know whether I am able to talk about this to make you understand the story. So we can talk more about them in our question and answer session. The next one, we can see that we have to look at the sociality in the story. What type of sociality? Because it means that there is a personal and social interaction of the participants with others. When the story is told, we have to see this sort of sociality. In this respect, we can say that, so from where we can get the sociality? Here, the participants talk to the researchers. In this respect, narrative speech highlights participants' relationship with others, particularly the researcher, who are also thought to be a part of the metaphoric parade. So, storytelling is called by Clendenin and Connelly is a parade, metaphoric parade. In the parade, who are going together? Researcher and the participants, because researcher is asking the story and participants is telling and the researcher is listening and developing. So the sociality is very important, the interaction between the researcher and the participants. And the another thing is important, that tellability, whether it is high or low. It refers to the extent to which an account conveys a sequence of reportable events and makes point in a rhetorically effective manner, novel, unusual, or unique. So the participant, we have to say whether the participants is telling the story spontaneously or no, it's not telling it spontaneously. So as a researcher, you have to give more prompts to elicit the stories. So tellability is very important to get to receive the stories. And researchers use different approaches, strategies, and methodologies within the framework of narrative research. So I have told to now till now, that what we have to look at the stories told by the participants. Now, when as a researcher we conduct any research or narrative inquiry, what we can use, what type of methodology we can use to collect data. So we can use stories or narratives might be collected through various processes. First of one, I have told till now, interviews. So you can collect the data from the interviews. The interviews is usually unstructured. So you might say that if it is unstructured, so how can I get to know about my research question? So usually unstructured, but you have to give an open-ended question. When you'll give the open-ended question, when you see as a researcher that the participant is not coming to your own research area or topics, then you can use some sort of prompts. So what if you ask them, what is can you please explain, can you please tell your story of coming to your new city? Okay, if you explore the story of the participants' arrival in a new city, suppose it's a migration. Okay, migration. So if you say that he told that, yes, I came here in Australia, there are lots of stories. Now I am coming, now I am here. I have two sons, four daughters. I enjoy food here. So you can see that you are asking the stories of his arrival, but he is not telling this one. Then you use, can you please tell me when you first arrived here? So you using the prompt, you can divert your participants' attention to the main question. So that, yes, I arrived. What did it happen? What you first did? So you can give the question in a structured way. You can use the open-ended way. But if you see the participants is not in the track, then you can use the semi-structured questions. Okay, so we can use, besides the interview, we can also collect data from the you can go to for field trips, and we can take the field notes of the shared experiences, or we can also keep records of the participants. Suppose if we observe any participants for 5 or 6 days, we can take the record in the morning. What did he say? What did he do in the noon, in the afternoon, at night? We can take the journal record, and we can also storytelling. It's very interesting, and we can also take the letter writing. It's very important. Suppose if you say that someone loves to write letter, so if you collect the letter for 3 or 4 years, and if you develop these stories, to do a narrative inquiry of his or her life, you can collect the letter and you can analyze them. And autobiographical or biographical writing is very important, it's very essential. You see that when you will collect data in conducting your narrative inquiry research, you see that you will also tell your own story with yourself. And yeah, some of the research can use the autobiography of the researcher to compare the stories of the participants. And we can also analyze the memoir, published memoir, or we can use the written language learning histories. So these things we can use as the sources of data for the narrative inquiry. We can see that we don't have to use only one source of data. We can use multiple sources of data in narrative research. Recent studies that are based on more than one data, we can see that coffee used written language learning autobiographies, and side by side the is followed by 1.5 hour interviews. So these study use two sources of data. Ortec tape to 2013, we can see the written language learning autobiographies, journal entries, and the semi-structured interviews. So three types of data. And the ELIS 2013 use classroom observation, in-depth semi-structured interview, and the language biography interviews with teachers. So you can see that you don't have to use only one source of data, multiple sources of data we can use. Is the advantage is that we can analyze, we can get insight from one sources, and we can use that to the other sources. Longitudinal studies, some studies are can be done for a long period of time. Suppose to story and re-story their experiences. And we can go to the narratives interaction. So narratives can also be developed through the interaction between the participants and the researchers. Then participants' contribution to the interview as a whole, it focuses on short stresses of narrative within the interview. This approach draws on the studies of talk in interview in naturally occurring conversation in applied linguistics, sometimes use short extract form, transcribe research interviews as data. So we can see that it refers to their data as a small stories in contrast to the big stories or life history approach. Insight not only it provides insight not only into the discourse of the narrative, so I am telling it narrative in interaction. That means you don't have to look at the whole story. When you will collect the data, you'll take the short short extract from the story, from the interviews, like the thematic analysis or the content analysis, and you'll focus on the that part particular parts of the interviews. And if you analyze as a small stories, then it will provide insight not only the discourse of the narrative, but also it will give you overview of the issues associated with the story. Narrative frame is also very interesting. Sometimes you'll see that the narrative frame is used. The researcher will not ask you a question directly, face-to-face interview. The researcher can develop the narrative frame. That is, there will be a particular a question will be given, such as you can see that Barkusen and which 2008 developed the narrative frame as an instrument that would help teacher to structure their experiences in narrative form and facilitate the collection and analysis of narrative from related a large number of participants. So the narrative frame, what does it mean? That means it is a template. It is written a story template consisting of incomplete sentence and blank spaces, so that the teachers can write complete that part, and the participant record their own experiences and reflections. So types of these types of narrative frames help. Here you can collect data from lots of participants, and the authors analyze the data using qualitative content analysis or the comment like this. It is a useful exploratory tool for gaining an initial overview of an area of study, though it will not give you a more insightful study, but it will give you initial overview of the area of study, and later you can go to the participants that means, if first of all you can give a narrative frame to 20 or 50 teachers of your school to collect the data. Then after getting the narrative frame output, you will see that initial overview of the study. So what you will decide how many participants you should select for your research. That means it might be 5 or 10. Based on this narrative frame, you can go for the in-depth interview. So it's also interesting. Then the multimodal narratives. For the linguistic research, it is very important. The use of multimodal data is growing trend in narrative inquiry, especially in literacy research, and a number of studies have recently appeared in second language learning context. These include studies in which visual material is used in conjunction with written explanation or language learning history. So you see that not only one mode, multimodal. So written explanation, language learning histories, and studies in which the data consisted of multimodal narratives. Another story you can see that Greer used what is called photo narratives in conjunction with interviews and the classroom observation in a longitudinal study of two Saudi Arabian students studying in the United States. The visual material in these studies typically consists of drawings or photographs that represent something of significance to the participant in the context of the study. These are then used as a stimulus for writing or talk or analyzed directly. So, in such a way, you can see that we can also use the multimodal narratives. Most importantly, we have collected the data. We have used these methods. So, what will be our next things? Bold suggests that overall research must have purpose as the main tenet guiding the choice of methods. So when we choose the method, we have to think what is the purpose of our study? What is the main target objectives? So we have to select the methodology based on our purpose. For example, sometimes narrative research aim to represent internal individual states. That means what is the internal psychological state of the participants, or sometimes external social circumstances. So is the one internal, another external. So if it is the external, you can use the narrative frame that you can give a template and you giving some blank space, or whatever external social circumstance you want to know. And at that time you can use the narrative frame. But when you go to the individual internal state, then you have to go for face to face individual interviews in migration studies. So see, the methodology, for the methodological choices we have must have a purpose. Yeah, and the other cases we can see in migration studies, narrative inquiry is frequently used as the mediational tool and process through which migrants are able to re-story their experiences and seek to establish their professional and personal identity. Okay, so it is my area of interest. So I have conducted a research on migrant workers. In order to know what type of identity they hold in their host society. So for this reason, why I have used narrative inquiry. So to know their experiences, I went through their experiences by asking interviews, and I developed a story from their data, interview data, and I shared the story with the participants, and they gave me some feedback, and I re-story their experiences. And in such a way we establish I explored what type of identity they hold, and later on I explain their identity, I explain their sense or perception of identity in terms of the theoretical knowledge of the identity, theoretical understanding of the identity. Also, some narrative researchers use extensive life history. So, life history in an attempt to understand how personal lives navigate social change, or how social and cultural circumstances controlled people's lives. So, here we can use the life history if we want to use these things. Some other narrative research aim to focus on personal account of experiences. is the personal identity or the agency, whatever. So you can see that what are the agencies. So in order to establish one's identity in a new society, the participants must have to struggle. So to do the struggle, they must need some determination that is called the agency. So some research focus on the personal identity and agency. Data analysis. So how can we have collected the data? We have learned about the methodology, how we will collect the data. Now, how we'll analyze the data? There are two types of data analysis in narrative inquiry. Although the most frequently used method of data analysis in narrative research is content or thematic analysis. The two types of data analysis. One is the analysis of narrative. So what is this? One is the analysis of narrative, another is the narrative analysis. First one, analysis of narrative. It is the conventional, traditional, thematic or content analysis that we use in the qualitative research. It involves searching or coding data for the themes, categorizing the data in terms of themes, and looking for patterns of association among them. So this analysis is just like the content or thematic analysis that we use in our qualitative research. In this respect, narrative inquiry studies may differ little. So if it is like the qualitative inquiry, so a qualitative research, though narrative inquiry is part of qualitative research, but how it might be different from other qualitative research methods such as the case study and other things. So it is qualitative research is similar data analysis procedure, but innovation in the data analysis is that we can discover, we can use the discourse analysis. So the innovation for the narrative inquiry is the discourse analysis. So what is the discourse analysis? We have collected the data from through the interviews or field trip experiences or journal or autobiographical data. So how can we do? We can, if we decide that we use the analysis of narrative, then we can use the thematic. So we'll identify the particular theme from the data. Due to the time limitation, I can't show you how you have to do the coding, how you have to do the categorization, how you have to do the thematic analysis. So if there is any opportunity, I will do it. But I am just telling that you might have known that thematic analysis. So for the narrative inquiry, we can use the discourse analysis of narrative data that has been employed by the researcher who said that suppose language teachers or learners narrative not as a factual of experiences but as a source of insight into the discursive construction of experiences in these studies. So in the discourse analysis, what we can use the content and meaning of experiences investigated through the study of the structure. So if we select one paragraph or one extract from the interview data of the participants, suppose they are talking about their identity. So we'll see what type of language, what type of structure they are using, what type of language they are using, and the use of narratives in the context, and what type of narratives they used. So content and the meaning and the structure is very important in doing the discourse analysis. Sometimes we can see that people are using some sort of metaphor when they are telling their stories. So in the discourse analysis, you have to explain why this type of word is used here, why this type of particular type of structure is used here. The structural approach, we know that approach focuses on the examining the linguistic structure of a narratives, whereas the thematic analysis focus on the content of the narratives, the events that occur, the experiences that people have, and the meanings that emerge through findings of a set of themes within the data. So in the discourse analysis, what we have to combine both things, the linguistic structure and the thematic analysis. With regard to what is special about the narratives, Risman suggests that combining both thematic and structural analysis enhances the quality of the narrative analysis, generating insight that would be not achieved for through only the thematic analysis. So we have to, if we use the analysis of narrative, we can use both things, the structural approach and the thematic approach. For this reason, we can use the discourse analysis. It's very interesting, discourse analysis. Another one that I have told you, there are two ways of data analysis in narrative inquiry. One is the analysis of narrative. Next one is the narrative analysis. What is this? Configuring data content into a coherent. When the data is told, we'll combine them in a coherent story. The outcome of the analysis is a story. So the way will make a story, developed the story based on the data. And previously, the analysis of narrative means they take the extract of the data related to the theme. But the narrative analysis, first of all, after collecting all the data, will develop a story. And from this story, we'll analyze. Based on, we'll analyze that story. So researcher turns data into a story. Narrative analysis is not simply a matter of retelling stories. I have told you, it's not a fairy tales. So it is not simply a matter of retelling a story that have been told as data, but of lending narrative coherence to non-narrative data in order to bring out or highlight meanings in relation to the research issue in focus. Some recent studies that adopted this approach involve autobiographical reflection and writing. The study is by Kanagaraja is largely based on reflection. Choi drew on personal diaries and documents to reflect on her experience and multilingual condition. So narrative analysis means we have to, as a researcher, we have to construct the story. Then we evaluate the story through the if it is suppose Kanagaraja is based on analyzes the story based on the reflection. So personal diary and documents to reflect we can add here, or we can use as a researcher if we are not related, we are not the participants, so we can analyze the story based on the current research, based on the current theoretical understanding. Suppose if we want to look at the agency of a group of people, so we have to see what is meant by agency, what are the theory of the agency, what is the theoretical frame of my research or for exploring the agency. So the story will be explained, analyzed in terms of the theoretical understanding, theoretical framework. A story means different things to different researchers, such as if we do the narrative analysis, so as a researcher we can analyze the story in total long story, or we can analyze the snippets of the content, a small story. We can develop a small story based on this theme, based on these things, okay, or we can extract of interview data in a story form. Another thing, stories are relevant to researcher work in different ways as a process during data collection. So stories can be developed when the data collection was going on, or the researcher can develop the story after completing the data collection, listening to the audio record. Another one, the story the researcher tells about the data collected. The researcher can tell about his own experience about the participants in his own way. So stories can be the researcher can develop the story in three different ways. First, while they are taking the interview, and when they completed the interview, or after collecting all the data, after reading the transcription again and again, researcher can develop retell the story on behalf of the participants. So where the researcher will focus when they do the analysis? What the stories? The first one, what the stories are about. The way they have been organized or structured, their form, the way in which the events in the stories were experienced. Or we can use all of them. Okay, so we will focus on the context, we will focus on the content, and we will focus on the structure, or we can use together. Murray recommends two stages of analyzing narrative data. That means after collecting data, we can do two things. First, we can describe the story. Then we'll explain the analyze the story, interpret the stories in light of the theoretical literature. Two way. First, after collecting data, we can develop the stories, we can present the story, and we can after presenting the developing the story, we'll compare the story with the other participants. If I have 5 participants, we'll compare the stories among the 5 participants. Another one, that is the interpretive, that will interpret the stories from the theoretical literature. So Barkhusen said that there are 5 core dimensions: narrative story study and the narrative inquiry. Stories as interaction and stories from interaction, less engagement. So you'll see from the lecture of the Barkhusen these 5 core dimensions. For the time limitation, I am just skipping these things. This one, methodology. I am telling you about one of my research project. That is, I have used narrative inquiry. The context was the Bangladeshi-born immigrant community in Brisbane. The participants were only 5 because it is a short project. 3 months project, 5 Bangladeshi migrant workers. I use purposive sampling category to recruit the participants. The first one is that they must be migrated on 457 visa, work visa. And they must have limited English skill, and they must stay in Australia at least 5 years. Otherwise, before the 5 years, if the participants were the first 1 year or second year, that is called the honeymoon period of the migration level. The participants were 5 only, and the category was they must have limited English skill, and they must have involved with the working stage, and they are in Australia at least 5 years. I use interview, and it is audio recorded and transcript, and I use semi-structured interviews in 2 rounds. And my problem, research problem, was that how do low English proficiency migrants' language experience relate to their sense of well-being in Australia? We know that well-being, happiness, is closely related to their language proficiency of the host society. So I try to identify their story, what type of difficulties, what type of sense of well-being they do have without their high English proficiency. The challenges. I am skipping this one. Challenges later I am describing it. So how I'll collect the data? For the data was in 2 round. First round interview, researcher, me, and participants talked about their story. And the interview was audio recorded, and I did the transcription later on. Transcribe and analyze the transcription, first draft of the data. And after getting the transcription, I have identified in which aspect I didn't understand. What did the participant exactly mean? I identified whether I have got my information related to my research questions. I took the note. Okay, then second round of interview I went to them. Another thing, after the transcription, I have developed their story based on the transcription. So I went to their home again. I read out the stories in front of them because they have low literacy, they couldn't read. So I read out the story, and they gave me feedback. No, I actually mean this one. So it is called co-construction narrative, or I revised my draft. And it is also called the member checking, because I developed the story and it is also checked by the participants. And member checking and evaluation means the participant gave me evaluation. They know this thing. So here this process was telling that the participants were reflection, using his or her reflection and responses. Reflection means he already gave me told me the story 2 weeks ago. So after 2 weeks, when I went to their home, when I read out the story, he again reflected on the story, whatever he told to me, and responded. So it is co-constructed. Again, I recorded these things, transcribed and analyzed the transcript as second draft of that narrative. And again, I went to them and checked. So in such a way, see, the story is not written not only by me, but also with the help of the participants. Then I developed I went for the analysis. This analysis is, I told you, there are two types of analysis: descriptive and the interpretive. Descriptive means I developed individual narratives based on the content and structure. My content was the language experiences, what are their language experiences, what are the communicative strategies, what type of strategies they use when they do not know the exact word of the language. Then what is their sense of well-being. Then after developing the story, I interpret this story in terms of the theoretical literature on the what does it mean by the language experience, what does it mean by the communicative strategy, what does it mean by the well-being. These things. Then the language experiences. The participants, I'm now showing you I have. So, what type of challenges I face? It is often a challenge for the narrative inquirer to create meaningful linkage connection among the experience described by the research participants. So, sometimes the participants are very introvert. They don't want to. They don't know how to say their story at that time. So, what I did, the Gavrim and Holstein examine how stories are triggered by the researchers through open or more subtle invitation, and recommend that the researcher has to concentrate on the conversation during the interview, since it might affect the way our stories tell. So when we go for interview for the narrative, we have to cooperate the participants. We don't have to do anything, any other thing. We don't have to write anything. We have to cooperate. So that the participants can tell their stories spontaneously. If the participants is stopped, you have to trigger out. The Mostly Atkinson's presents the primary role of researchers in narrative English is the guide for the journey. What is the journey? This journey is for both interview and interviewer. I told you there's a metaphoric parade with the storytelling parade in which the participant and researcher are going together. He also showed that the role of the guide is to have idea or knowledge on what question to ask. So before going to the interview, you will have to know what type of knowledge, what type of idea, what type of topic you need to ask. He also shows that the role of the went to us. Throughout the entire set of interview, the researcher has to play a role of a good listener. So you have to listen very attentively, giving some tokens of appreciation and admiration, and sometimes admitted their persistence, struggle, and wisdom. So as a good listener, you listen to your person very carefully, and you sometimes say, wow, you did it. You have to do the appreciation. How did you do it? It's very great work. It's a very achievement. It's a great achievement for you. So you have to say something appreciating, admiration. And if there is they do some sort of struggle, you say, oh, you did you are actually very great. You have done this struggle a lot. So in this way, the researcher will help the participants to tell their stories in more lively way, a spontaneous way. Now, I talked about that. My research focus was language experiences, communicative strategies, and the sense of well being. So, first, the language experience. The participants who were asked to describe where and how often they used English for an idea of the context of their interaction in it. Their stories revealed that there was no immediate need of English in their jobs, where only a specific work skills were required. They are chef, they're working as a cook, so they think they told me that in the kitchen they don't have to talk. They have to do some they only have to do work. Abul. So I have taken the extract from their interview data related to the language experiences. So that Abul is the pseudonym I am using. I am satisfied with my current level of proficiency by which I can meet up my both professional as well as social need of communication, though I can neither read or write. Here it is mistake. So Abu said that he can neither read or write in English, but he is satisfied that he can do his communication. The Karim, most of my fellow workers are like me from different language backgrounds. So I don't feel shy to talk to them in English because we have comparable levels of proficiency in English. So you can see is that you can also look at these things. Why the shyness? So in the theoretical literature, we can see that shyness makes people not to communicate. Okay, so here Korim is using these things that Korim is using his agency means the determination. Okay, agency not to feel shy to talk to them. Okay, because he's confident that they have the comparable level of proficiency in English with whom he works at his workplace. We can develop our speaking skill, talking to one another in our basic English knowledge. Sometimes we correct one another of our mistakes. So see what type of language experiences they are showing. So if we look at that, I explain everything in terms of the theoretical literature on the language experiences and the communicative strategies. Next one, we can see that another participant, Elias, for shopping, we don't have to talk much. So see where they have to talk much and where they don't have to talk. There is no system of bargaining like in Bangladesh. Prices are fixed and are written on every product in the super shop. So however, we have to talk to the salesman, so we find the products, and during the payment, that is very slow. I don't find it difficult in shopping. Okay, so I identified the language experience in terms of various domains. So they are telling that they can continue their social communication with using various strategy. Now you see what type of strategies they are using. We know that from the theoretical understanding literature on the communicative strategy, we can see there are lots of communicative strategies such as asking for repetition, apology, overuse of lexis, avoidance strategy, social strategy. So lots of theoretical theory based on related to the communicative strategy. So I use this theory when I analyze their interview data. So Corinne said that when I first arrived in Brisbane, so he first arrived in Brisbane, a city in Australia. I had and went to the city. I had a cold. Went to the city to buy a scarf, but at that time I didn't know its name in English, and so I tried to make the salesperson understand using many gestures, long cloth, in such a way, so using gestures, and finally became successful, pointing a person who owed it. Then when he was unable to make it understand, he said, see these things, I need these things. Okay, so is the communicative strategies. Another communicative strategy says, see, Abul, I always go somewhere in groups of my friends so that we can help one another. So it's another strategy to go to in a team. In group, if there are problems, especially in finding direction to new places, some of us are good at listening, so they share their skills. Some of their friends are good at listening while others have fluency in speaking. I am good and Abul is good at guessing meaning from the context, by which we are able to solve problems instantly. So they are using shared skills in doing their communication. Elias, I never face any problems in communicating other. I have confidence in myself and I ask them frankly. So it is his agency, boldness, confidence that he can do. He don't feel shy and never think inferior. So it is also he can explain it from the theoretical literature. Another thing, the well-being is very theoretical understanding. If a theory on the well-being is very diverse. So subjective well-being consists of three factors: happiness, life satisfaction, absence of negative effect. And the well-being is based on health, job satisfaction, financial success. In such a way, there are lots of literature on the theory of well-being. And from the data, I have seen that I am lucky, Abul said that I am lucky to get a chance to live in a peaceful and secure country like Australia, where my life was not so secure in my country when I lived, and the life of my friends and relatives in Bangladesh are not still secure and good like mine, in spite of their better education as well as position in the society. So, see, Abul is telling his own happiness, comparing to his friends and family back home. So he is going back home. He compares first with his life in back home, and next he is comparing his life with the friends and family back home. So comparison, so is the temporal thing. First his present condition with the past, and another thing, the present condition situation with the other people with the higher education. So see, their comparison, you can do lots of analysis here. We know that people are happy with their education, with their position, higher position in the society, but Abu says that they are his friends and family with having a better education or positions are not happy like him, that he is here. Okay, another one, Karim. Here I can enjoy all facilities equally from Brisbane City Council. That makes my life more peaceful and satisfying. I can lead here healthy and secure life that would not have been possible in my home country. Again, see, compare from his current situation and the past situation. If he were imaginary present, if he were currently in his own country, he would not be. So it is the temporal thing, the story. So another one, Elias also emphasizes his satisfaction by pointing that life in Australia is safety and secure. So see, you have to develop the story comparing many things, or you have to explain. As a researcher, we have to evaluate the story in terms of existing literature, in terms of the theoretical literature. Even we can also explain them from the reflection of our reading or writing. Findings. We have got language experts show that they are exercise their agency to position themselves in the host society as useful and valuable. So we can see that they do not have English proficiency, higher English proficiency, but they exercise their agency, boldness to position themselves. I don't feel shy. I don't feel shy to ask anything useful. So they think that they have to position themselves in the host society because it is useful and valuable. Moreover, they are confident of their work skill that increase their self-respect, confidence, and agentic power. They are satisfied with their lives in Australia despite their limited English proficiency and contribute to the society as a skilled worker. Due to the time limitation, I am not can't say everything. You can read my article. I have there is an article on this research. There you can read this. An implication: English proficiency. What is the implication of this research? So whatever you conduct any study, you have to identify what is the implication of your study in your society, in the current literature. I have to identify. English proficiency may not be the foremost skill required for the lives of skilled migrant workers because they may have other skills through which they can connect and contribute to the mainstream society. So it must be useful to the immigration policymakers in different countries. They think where multiculturalism and linguistic diversity has received official recognition. Important source for researchers or course designer of the migrant English program designer who develop curriculum as well as lesson plan for the migrant English program in Australia. The concluding what this, although this study has limitation due to a small sample size, only 5, it is believed that the findings drawn from the participants' narrative will broaden our understanding of the relationship between language, migration, and well-being. And I want to give my final words as a narrative researcher. I can see that the participant has told me the story, shared their experiences. As a researcher, I have developed this story and I have interpreted from my own understanding, from my own knowledge on the particular issues. And what will happen? What is the useful of this story to the other people? The interesting thing is that the entries 2008 proposed that the audience shapes the narratives. So this story, when it is published, when it is read by the other people, they shape the narrative in their own way. Audience shapes narratives and they are multi-level. Each person brings to the narrative a different interpretation. So if a migrant workers like them read the story, they say that, oh my God, I'm not only alone in this world who is facing such kind of things. So they will find the similarity with them. Other people might think that, oh my God, I know that previously I knew that the English is the main important thing for the happiness in Western country, but I don't have English proficiency, but they are very happy. So each person interpret the same thing in different way. Clandinin and Connolly also present that narrative inquiries is multi-layered and many-stranded. To illustrate the multi-layered function of the narrative inquiry, Gordon has used the metaphor of onions. Do you know the onions have lots of layers, arguing that, like the peeling of onions, narrative is an endless discovery of the layers of life and experience. Every cell of the onion present innumerable worlds from peeling the onion layer after layer to reaching its heart. So we can see there are lots of layers in the onion. Sometimes new onions grow if the onion is placed in the ground with proper care, and sometimes tears some come out of our eyes while we cut onions. So onions can be grown up as onions can be uh, bring tears from us. So see what is the significance of narrative. So it is interpreted in different ways, in multi-level ways. So narrative is just like the onions of readers, by causing tears or reproducing new ideas. So when I read a story, I can get the similarity with me. I can feel a sorrow for this story, or I can develop new idea. Oh my God! So I can change myself. So this story has different significance. It can also enhance our taste and passion for life. So it's exciting and these things. And thank you, everyone. Oh my God, I can't go. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, ma'am, for such a useful, informative, and wonderful presentation. It was really a comprehensive presentation that you gave. So now we will move towards the Q&A session. But before that, I want to apologize for earlier that I saw that in the start the video quality was very poor, and that was because the internet connection was unstable. So sorry for that. So I will be telling the format of the webinar again in short, that we just had this presentation. Now we will have a Q&A session. First we will be taking questions from registration forms, and then from the live chat. So we will do that for now, and then after that I will be telling the way through which you will be receiving your certificates. So make sure you watch till the end. So now without further ado, we will start the Q&A session. So here are the questions from the registration forms. So the first question is from Sahira Jabin. She's from Pakistan. She says, I would appreciate if you add narrative inquiry in linguistic research with regards to TV advertisements. What theoretical frameworks can be deployed to analyze visual narrativity other than SFL?
So I should give the answer now.
Yes, ma'am. You may.
Okay. So TV advertisement. So if we look at the TV advertisement, you have to first of all transcribed. Okay, you have to do the transcriptions. Then you have to first focus on the content, which content you want to identify of the particular advertisement. So I told you, when we do the analysis, we have to think of several things. One is the context, in what context it is doing on, and the content, what content you want to do it, and what you that means what you want to the gender things, gender identity, or you want to identity you want to explore the identity in terms of it might be the gender, or in terms of religion. Mm. So you have to identify first what you want to do, and based on this content you have to develop the theoretical framework. So if you want to see the language variation in terms of gender, then you look at the sociolinguistics theory on the language variation in gender. Or if you look at the attitude of gender, attitude of masculine. Suppose you can see the TV advertise on the washing powder. Suppose in the washing powder advertisement, if we see that women are washing the doing the washing. So in some advertisement you can see that men are doing these things. So you can look at the theory, that is the gender perspective. The using the doing the household chores. So based on the content, you can develop your theoretical framework. So first, for this reason, you have to identify the content. You have to identify the context.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Very well answered. So the second question is from Kismullah. It's from Indonesia. What is the most important consideration before you decide that you are going to use narrative inquiry?
I have told you that the most important consideration before we decide that I love the story, I love the experience of the people. I want to make the experience heard or read by the other people. The most important thing that I have to explore the experience of the person. I have to develop the story based on the experiences. I have to analyze them from the current theoretical understanding, and I will publish it. When it will be published, then the people will interpret it in their own way. Okay, so a story, I love a story and I want to make the story read by other people. It is my most important consideration.
Okay, thank you very much and for the answer. So we really need to be interested first in the content and the topic, so then we can use the narrative inquiry for understanding their experiences and their story.
Yeah.
So okay. So now we will move towards the live question answers. So I would request all the audience to write their questions in the chat box, uh, in the live chat, so that ma'am can answer those questions. So we will wait for a minute for the questions to come. Okay. So the audience who are watching right now, you may write your answers in the live chat, and ma'am will be answering them. Ma'am, till the questions come up, there were also many questions related to the topic in the registration forms. Those were quite repetitive, but some of those were like how to like see the validity and reliability, or how to maintain the validity and reliability in this
Okay.
narrative research.
Okay, okay. So there reliability and the validity of the narrative research, that means you have to cross check. That is the member checking. It is called the member checking. So you can see that part. I told you that when the researcher get the story and develop the story, the researcher will go to the participant to check whether the story is written in a proper way. And they take the researcher will take the feedback for, take the perception from the participant, and the researcher will revise the story again. So it is called the member checking. So here the researcher is not writing the story in his or her own way. It is developed with the help of the participants. So in this case, you don't have to think of the validity or the trustworthiness. And that researcher can also check the data with the fellow researcher in the same field, or they can share the story in the academia or research gate or any things that they get the feedback. Or they can if they present the paper research in the conferences or webinar, they will get the feedback from the part audiences. So you don't have to think of the validity and trustworthiness of the narrative inquiry. It is you can we can do it through the our member checking.
Okay, thank you. And there is one question from Farman Ali, the live chat, that to collect data through only senses is enough for writing a story.
So what is that? Through senses.
Like maybe he's saying that not taking interviews or something, just analyzing them.
To collect data through census, actually I'm not sure. The I told you the how can the data can be collected. It can be from the interviews, it can be from any text, or any reflection, anything. Or you can see that the TV advertisement, We can also do any TV advertisement or newspaper article or extract. Okay, so we can develop these things, develop a story based on these things. But I'm sorry, extremely sorry, I don't understand what is the sense.
Okay, it's okay. Finally, you can write the question more clearly, and we
Yeah,
will surely be
yeah.
answering that. Thank you. So we will wait for a few minutes, as I already read some comments in the registration form that this topic is quite new to them, so they don't have any questions. There were a lot of people who are saying that they are just
Mm.
coming here to learn and know what it is. So
I
uh,
can also share my one article, research article. Hmm. I can send you, or you can share it here. So this article will give our participants, audience, to understand what is actually narrative inquiry.
all right, ma'am. So we will. You can share slides also and the article, and then we can
Mm.
make sure
Mm.
to make it available to the participants
Mm.
and other people so they
Yeah,
can understand better.
yeah, yeah.
So I think this would be it for the webinar today. And thank you all the participants for joining, and thank you very much, ma'am, to for taking out the time and giving this lecture. Uh, Okay, we have one more question from Farman Ali. So let's take it before ending the webinar. So yes, as you have explained the perspective of workers, but what about these who have to do conversation on daily basis?
As you have explained the perspective of workers, but what about these who have to be conversation daily basis? So what about these who have to do conversation daily basis? That means my research participant was only the migrant workers. For this reason, I took the data from that perspective. If I want to compare the data between my participants and the other people, then if it was the focus of my research, I would engage them. Okay, but my research focus was on that the particular migrant workers, only 5 participants. For this reason, so it is up to the researcher what is the focus of the research. So if I you have explained the perspective of workers, but what about these who have to converse on daily basis? Yes, if I had the research objective to compare the data with the collected from the migrant workers and other people, then I would take data from them. There's things.
Okay, thank you, ma'am, very much for clarifying. So
Mm,
that's all for now, and thank you again
mm.
for giving us the time and for sharing your knowledge with all the participants. And I hope the participants have also enjoyed and learned a lot from this informative presentation which you gave. And thank you for answering the questions as well. So,
My pleasure, and
okay.
thanks for inviting me.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for
Okay.
accepting the
Okay.
invitation. So, would
Okay.
you
Thank you.
have any last thoughts or any advice for the new researchers which are going for this field?
Okay, so the new researcher, don't feel hesitate to contact me in my email address if you face any problem regarding narrative inquiry. If you want to do the narrative inquiry, you can write to me anytime in my email, and I am happy to help the novice researchers to develop our research field through the narrative inquiry, because it is very prominent, and now it is catching very attention from different field of research. So never hesitate to talk to me in email. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, participants. So now we will be sharing the feedback form. And before sharing the feedback form in live chat, I would like you all to join uh, this webinar through the YouTube website or the YouTube app in case you are using your mobile phone to see the live chat, because many people complain that they do not find the live chat option. So make sure you are not watching in Gmail, because there is the option to watch directly in Gmail and not coming to the YouTube website itself. So make sure you have opened the youtube.com and then you come to this webinar and are watching the webinar directly in the YouTube website. Or if you are using mobile, make sure you are logged into your Google account and you have opened your YouTube application, and then you are watching this webinar. So there would be an option of live chat under the video, so make sure you click on it, and I will be now sharing the feedback forms link in the live chat. Over there, in the form which will be opened, if you click on the link, you can share the feedback about me, the host, and also you can give compliments for Dr. Farzana. And if you have any question which you want to ask or it was left unanswered, you can contact us as Linguistics and Pedagogy Webinars at gmail.com, and you can ask us to ask that question from Dr. Farzana, and she will be happy to help. And we will also give out the article which ma'am were mentioning and her slides, if she grants us the permission. We will be sharing it on the Linguistics and Pedagogy Facebook group. So make sure you also like our Facebook page to keep where we post updates regularly, so you are up to date of what happening and what are the future webinars coming in. So that's all about it. So now I'm posting this feedback form link in the comments, so you may click on it and fill the form as soon as possible. Okay, so if you are facing any problem filling the form, or if you cannot find the link itself to the form, then make sure you have opened the YouTube from the browser, and also from the YouTube app if you are using your mobile, so that you can see the live chat. And still, if you cannot see the live chat, then make sure you are logged into your Gmail account so you can find the live chat. So I will be waiting for a while for you to fill the form. If you face any problem, you can comment here, and we will try to resolve that problem. So we have received 64 responses on the form so far. Again, thank you all for joining, and for those who are still watching the webinar, we will be sharing what webinars are coming next after this. So this is the webinar which will be conducted on 24th July. So the topic would be Politeness and Pragmatics by Kishwar Nasli at 3 p.m. Pakistan Standard Time and 6 p.m. in Philippines. And the date would be 24th July. So make sure you check what time and date it is in your time zone if you are in a different country. So, and also more webinars are coming in August, in the month of August. So make sure you also join them and learn a lot from it as well. And thank you again for being active and participating throughout the webinar. And I hope to see you in next webinars as well. Okay, thank you very much, Joy. Okay, good to hear, Robert, that you have filled your form. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Osma. Thank you, Annalisa. Thank you. Okay, so if you cannot find the link of the form, then make sure you are joined into the uh, webinar through YouTube app and you are logged into your Gmail account. If you are joined into Gmail account, then and watching from the YouTube app, then you can find the live chat. And in the live chat, we are posting this feedback form link. Okay, thank you, Salma. Thank you, Maestro. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Fawad Khan. Thank you very much. Can I have the email address of Dr. Farzana? Okay, so what you can do is that you email us at Linguistics and Pedagogy Webinars, and then we will forward your question or query to Ma'am Farzana. And if she gives us the permission, we can share her email address with you. Okay, thank you very much. Make sure you fill your feedback form. If you do not fill your feedback form, you will not be eligible to receive the certificate of participation. So, do you have a new design for the certificate? Not yet, but we are planning on doing so. We will try to make another design for the certificate soon. Okay, how can we analyze the written narrative? Okay, so you can email us this question and then we will forward it to Dr. Fazana. Thank you very much for joining, Chinky. Okay, so we have got 124 responses so far, and still 62 people are watching this webinar live. So make sure you also fill the feedback form, and this is our email address on the screen. You can see down here. So linguistics and pedagogy webinars at gmail.com. You can email us there, and the PowerPoint presentation copy, yes, we will be sharing it in the Linguistics and Pedagogy group, which is on Facebook. So you can go to Facebook and write Linguistics and Pedagogy Webinars, and then you will find our group with our logo, and it has some sort of blue background, so you will know that's our group. Okay, so 127 forms have been filled. 54 viewers are still here. Thank you all for joining and being a part of this webinar. I hope you have enjoyed it thoroughly and learned a lot from it. Alex Xavier, thank you. Thank you, Zapra. I hope that's the correct pronunciation. So, done with the evaluation. Thank you very much. The feedback forms link is in live chat, and after this live webinar ends, the live chat will also disappear for a while and the link will be closed. So make sure you fill it as soon as possible. 136 responses. And once you have filled the feedback form, you can come back if you want to and say that I have filled the feedback form, and then uh, you can leave this webinar, this video. All right. If you have filled the feedback form correctly, you will be receiving your certificate within a week. We will update when you will be receiving your certificates on Facebook page. Facebook page name is Linguistics and Pedagogy Webinars. So yes, if you have any questions or queries from me about this organization or about the certificate process, then you can ask in the live chat. Thank you very much for joining, Anderson. right? Is there any more schedule for another incoming webinar? Yes, there is another webinar. Let me show you. So this is the webinar on 24th July, Politeness and Pragmatics, that we will be conducting. And after that, we have some webinars which will be arranged in August. So we will be updating about those soon on our Facebook page. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nahab. Thank you, Mario. So we have received 145 responses. I would request you all to, if whoever is present here watching the live, there is some person in live chat who is posting inappropriate comments. So can you please block that user from your ID or report them so they cannot do it to anyone else. So thank you very much for joining this webinar. All right, so we will continue for 1 minute. I will be here, and then we will be closing and closing the feedback form and also ending this live broadcast. So thank you again, all of you, for joining and being with us. Hope you have learned a lot. I have commented this link, the feedback form link in the live chat. So make sure you fill the form as soon as possible. And thank you everyone for joining. This is the link which I have given in the live chat. Okay, so 148 responses and 36 live viewers. So thank you all for watching the webinar. In 15 seconds, I will be ending this webinar. Thank you very much.